The Chapter 2 Season 1 Cash Cup domination of UnknownxArmy was definitely a sight to be seen, but what impact did it have on the overall community and how Cash Cups were played after that? Well, I have an interesting theory, so let's dive into that. It's September 2019. FNCS Trios is just finished and Chapter 2 has dropped. Some of the first tournaments of the season are solo cash cups, and the FNCS for this season is squads. You look over to the leaderboards in the NA East region of these solo cash cups, and you see UnknownxArmy at the top. If you watched any of Baller TW's videos or really knew anything about the scene, you knew exactly how dominant this guy was and what a good fighter he was too. Every week that passed, the leaderboards looked exactly the same. UnknownxArmy's name was up there in the top 10 or just downright winning the tournament. He streamed nearly every single one of these events to thousands and thousands of viewers who all enjoyed the show. And what a show it was. Now, there were solo cash cups in Chapter 1, but the majority of the tournaments that were really in the game at this moment were big stack tournaments with high prize pools like the World Cup qualifiers and obviously the FNCS Trios following that up. So for these cash cups, the meta and the way to play them really hadn't been established too much throughout the course of Fortnite Competitive's Chapter 1. And the people sucked. Like, come on, I got 78th in one of these cash cups. The players weren't that great. So circle back to UnknownxArmy winning these tournaments. What impact did that have on the community as a whole? Well, I think there was a multitude of factors that went into the huge progression that we saw in Cash Cup playstyles, and I do think a lot of that was rooted in UnknownxArmy. You play a Cash Cup today, you'll know that there's a lot of aggressive playstyle and hardcore Wkeying. I'm not saying there wasn't aggressive players and Wkeyers before UnknownxArmy by any means in World Cup qualifiers. That was basically Clix's main playstyle, was just to Wkey everyone he saw, and it really worked out for the time. However, UnknownxArmy's playstyle was that, but on steroids. I'm not talking about pill steroids, I'm talking about inject straight into the muscle, high dose plus insulin level of anabolics. UnknownxArmy fought anyone he saw, early game, mid game. He barely even played late game in some of these solo cash cups and still managed to pick up first place in multiple tournaments. At the time, his fighting skill was so much further ahead than everyone else's, and obviously, I don't want to make this an aim assist video, but he was the master of using Legacy Aim Assist to its fullest. There were very few players over the time that Legacy Aim Assist was out that were able to utilize its powers the same way that UnknownxArmy was. Whether it came to hitting every pump over 100 or just those classic crazy AR/AUG clips that we're so used to seeing from him back in this time. Combine the fact that he hit basically every single shot with the fact that at the time his mechanics were so much further ahead than everyone else's due to the amount of creative and wagers that he had played, and the fact that he knew what opponents were going to do and he could read their plays so easily, made UnknownxArmy just one of the best fighters hands down at this season, and in particular in these solo cash cups. He was so dominant this season that he even won FNCS in Chapter 2 Season 1 with Kez, who is now being banned, Avery and Ronaldo as well. So UnknownxArmy was truly at the top. Enter the dark times. Once FNCS squads had finished, there was a huge unknown within the community, and I don't mean UnknownxArmy, I just mean the future of the game. There was almost no communication about when the next FNCS was. FNCS squads had finished on the 8th of December, and the next FNCS wasn't up until March, being an almost 4-month gap with very small amounts of communication within this time. The final solo cash cup ended in the middle of January, leaving a complete 2 months of gap for any real tournaments. So what did players do in this time outside of being incredibly bored and complaining about it a lot on Twitter? Well, this was the most boring time in human existence for going on streams and watching content, because all players were doing was playing box fights and wagering at this time. If you were playing the game in early 2020 before unfortunately the pandemic happened, I guess you'll have played a lot of box fights and a lot of creative at this moment too. But this had a big impact on the game too, because the average player was learning the angles, they were learning how to fight, they were learning all different kind of things that top players already knew before this. Skill gap of the game absolutely skyrocketed throughout this period, with the average player being significantly better at these close range fighting skills. Now during this time, this is when the daily duo cups were announced. Obviously this was also a duo season for FNCS as well, however these cups were incredibly aggressive too. They were really fun, but incredibly aggressive, and the quality of the games were really bad. These were just Wkey tests, and along with the fact that a lot of players had become a lot better at fighting, these tournaments gave people practice to just Wkey over and over again in a tournament-style format. So here's where the problems all culminate. The platform cash cups, in particular the 2-round platform cash cups. The quality of the games in these were not good. People really like to go back and fantasize about having 2-round cash cups again, but the quality of the games back then were not good at all. Maybe some regions were a little bit more stacked than others, but in particular, come to the later half of the game, these were just not good at all. And the first round of these, guess what? A complete Wkey fest. I think this was a combination of multiple factors. Firstly, UnknownxArmy and many others, but mainly UnknownxArmy, showing it was possible to win cash cups and perform in top 10 and just generally make earnings from cash cups purely by being an incredible fighter and not even caring about endgame. The huge gap that then came between Season 1 and Season 2's FNCS, increasing the skill gap, which meant that a lot of these players thought they were unknown, when in reality they've done 1 or 2 Mongrel Classics before, and this made players think that they could just Wkey and win every single fight. This then forces more people to Wkey, because the lobbies are dead and they think that's what they need to do, resulting in more and more dead lobbies. And on top of this, that in these games, playing placement is relatively boring because then you will be Wkey'd, and this just forces everyone to start fighting aggressively all the time. So this is a huge issue for cash cups and round 1 of FNCS, but what's actually the solution to this? Well, you could just hope and pray that players stop doing this and realize that they're not peak unknown from Chapter 2 of Season 1, but so far, that's not really working out so well. So what's the actual solution to this? Well, what solo cash cups have been doing for the last 2 seasons, which is creating a disproportionately high amount of placement points and low elimination points, which in turn makes players play less aggressive and less Wkey focused and play for more placement. Sure, when you look at the leaderboards of the recent solo cash cups, realistically the players who are popping off with big elimination games aren't rewarded for this pretty much at all. However, the players who are consistent and play placement create better games for everyone else, even in the lower elo lobbies. Now, not every game is completely stacked. There are 10 moving, just like some other of the old cash cups when you're in the lower lobbies, because people need Wkey to catch up. But overall, this placement change has seen a huge increase in the amount of players who will play for placement. And I think this is the main solution to tournaments that don't have a huge prize pool. Because if players have a huge prize pool, they don't often get as bored and just Wkey like mad. They will play for placement, they will be more consistent, and that's what we've seen through pretty much all of the FNCSs over the last few seasons. However, you strip out that prize pool in something like a cash cup, which obviously Epic can't just keep throwing money into cash cups to create huge prize pools if they're not getting a return on that investment. So with a lower prize pool, players just aren't going to just play smart and play for endgame. They're going to fight and they're going to make the games not that good. Therefore, they make it more placement heavy and more people have higher quality games. Now, this was inevitable anyway. I'm not saying this was UnknownxArmy's fault by any means, but he definitely showed people how capable it was that if you were a top tier fighter, you could perform in these pretty much regardless by just wiping the lobby out. The skill gap was always going to increase, but I do think that gap that was left there between Season 1 and Season 2 accelerated that growth massively with the amount of skill that players increased over this time. I hope cash cup formats do stay similar because they are high quality games, and if there's any tournaments in the future that have a low prize pool, they also have a similar placement format to this. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. Peace!